Thank the Bells very much for their music this morning. If you're a visitor today, you may be wondering who I am and what I'm doing here. And if you're a member that hadn't been here for a while, you may be wondering why I'm here. Pastor Brian and Bootsy have begun a 13-week sabbatical. And about a year ago, Pastor Brian asked if I would be the interim senior pastor while he was gone. And obviously, I've agreed to do that. And it's been joyful this week, getting to know the staff and getting to know some of you. Our scripture today comes from Old Testament prophet Hosea in the 14th chapter, the conclusion to his book. And he writes these words, "Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all guilt. Accept that which is good, and we will offer the fruit of our lips. Assyria cannot save us. We will not ride upon horses. We will no more say, our God, to the work of our hands. For in you the orphan finds mercy. I will heal their disloyalty. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned from them. I will be like dew to Israel. He shall blossom like the lily. He shall strike root like the forest of Lebanon. O Ephraim, what have I to do with idols? It is I who answer and look after you. I'm like an evergreen cypress. And this is our memory verse. Your faithfulness comes from me. Those who are wise understand these things. Those who are discerning know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the upright walk in them, but the transgressors stumble in them." This is the word of our God. Spiritual wholeness for us is possible because of what God has done for us, so that our spiritual wholeness has more to do with what He has done than what we do to get spiritual wholeness. And I think the prophet was exactly right when he said, our faithfulness comes from Him. We couldn't be faithful unless God had already been faithful to us. And that's the message that Hosea came to understand as a prophet and wanted to share with God's people. And he learned that through an experience that's recorded in the first 3 chapters of the book of Hosea. And I want to tell you that story this morning. And I want to do it as a 3-act play. So assume we are in a theater. This is the stage, and to my right and left, we're in a kitchen. To my right and left are kitchen cabinets. Over here on the right cabinet, there's a sink. Other things on the left side that you would find in the cabinets, in the kitchen. Here's a hallway that leads to a front door. The play is just ready to begin. The lights are dimming out in the audience. The lights are coming up on stage. And as Hosea, the main character, enters from stage left, we can tell by looking out a window that's about right here that this is dawn. This is the early light of the day. As Hosea enters, he pours himself a cup of coffee. He has one of those automated timed coffee makers. He sets it on a table that's right here, walks his way to the front door, retrieves the newspaper, comes down and sits at the table and begins to read. And we can tell by the look on his face that this is a time of serenity and peace. This is one of his favorite times of the day. And then suddenly that silence is broken with a voice. Hosea. And Hosea looks up startled. He lives alone. There's no one else in the home. And yet he not only hears the voice, he feels a presence that's around him. And so he says in response, "Who are you?" And the voice said, "I am your God. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Hosea said, "Really?" And God said, "Really, I am who I say I am." He said, "Hosea, I want you to listen to me. I want to give you a plan for your life." You giving me a plan for my life? Yes, here's what I want you to do, and I want you to follow it in all of its detail. Hosea, I want you to go to the land of the unfaithful people. And I want you to find there a woman by the name of Gomer who's living in sexual sin. I want you to declare your love for her, bring her back, increase your love, and marry her and establish her in your home. And Hosea said, really? And God said, really? And then as quickly as that voice came and that presence came, the voice and the presence is gone. And Hosea's left wondering, why should he go to the land of the unfaithful people, find a woman by the name of Gomer he's never met, declare his love, and decide to marry her? But as Hosea reflects on his life, he's had enough experiences where he knew the only thing it could be was to be obedient to what God had said. Though he couldn't understand how being obedient would work itself all out, it always worked out well. And so Hosea is willing to give it a try since he believes this is from God. And we watch as he tidies up the house because he's a neat person. He secures the home. And the last we see of him, he's walking across the meadow towards the land of the unfaithful people. And the curtain falls on Act 1, Scene 1. If you can hear the noise, they're resetting the stage for Scene 2. As the curtain rises, we're in a village, and you see what you would normally see in the village. And as Hosea enters the village, there's been one question on his mind that he's not been able to answer. And it's this: how will he know in this land which woman is Gomer? God didn't give him a description, didn't say go to this particular place, he didn't say go to this place at this time. And so as he enters the village, he sees some women outside a shop standing around talking as women are prone to do. And he approaches them and says to them, do you know where I might find a woman by the name of Gomer? And you can tell by the look on their faces that he's just asked the wrong people the wrong question. One of them says, too bad every man in town wants to be in Gomer. Now they're coming from out of town for her services. And they turn their back on him and exclude him. And so he walks on down a few blocks, and he comes to 4 men working. Well, 3 men, 1 man is working, 3 of them are leaning on their shovels, as men are prone to do. And he asks them, do you know where I might find this woman called Gomer? And they start laughing and, oh, we know why you're here. And he said, no, you don't understand. We understand so well. Just tell me where I can find her. And finally they do. So they go down 2 blocks and turn to the left, be the last building on the right. So we watch as Hosea makes his way to this particular location. But still that question, how will he know which woman is Gomer? As he enters the building, there are a lot of women, other men there. And as he looks around, he sees in the back left corner a woman who catches his eye. And suddenly his hands feel a little bit sweaty. He's noticed his heart rate is increased. And it's like love is beginning to well up in him. And he's almost convinced that that must be Gomer. And then he notices that music's playing. You probably heard the song, Some Enchanted Evening. You meet a stranger across a crowded room, and then you'll know. And somehow Hosea knows that's got to be Gomer. So he walks up to her and says, might you be Gomer? And she says, well, yes, I am, but who might you be? He said, well, I'm Hosea. She said, well, Hosea, what do you want? And he said, no, you don't understand. And he begins to tell her this incredible story. And he tells her how when he saw her, his eyes were drawn to her, and how his hands got sweaty, and it felt like his heart rate was increasing, and like love was welling up in him. And he said, I don't want any sexual favors from you. I think I'm really beginning to love you. I'd like for us to follow God's plan and see where it takes us. Gomer is so moved. This is the only person that's offered her authentic love. the kind of love that accepted her for who she was, the only kind of love that could bring a sense of goodness into her life. Why wouldn't she say yes? And so we watch as they walk their way back across the meadow to Hosea's house, and the curtain falls on Act 1, Scene 2. They're setting up now for Act 2. But let me tell you that you and I are represented by one of these two characters in the play. Have you figured out who you are? Hosea or Gomer? If you're having difficulty, let me tell you, you're not Hosea. You and I are represented by Gomer, because the truth about us is that our God came looking for us in the same way Hosea went looking for Gomer. God came to us in the midst of our unfaithfulness and said, I want a relationship with you. I want this love between us to grow. In the scriptures, we put it this way from 1 John. This is love. Not that we love God, but that He loved us. Another way of saying that is this truth. He loved us before we loved Him. Now, I think we can put other verbs in that statement and stay true to the text. God believed in us before we believed in Him. God sought us before we sought Him. God wanted a relationship with us before we wanted a relationship with Him. So when we think about our spiritual wholeness, we realize we enter our relationship with God because He's invited each and every one of us into that relationship, and He's come seeking us to share in His love, just as Hosea offered his love to Gomer. Well, it's time for Act 2. We're back in the kitchen of Hosea. He once again enters, stage left, gets his cup of coffee, turns to put it on the table, and discovers there's a note on the table. That note wasn't there the night before, and he knows it wasn't there because he's a very neat person, and he made sure everything was put away before he went to bed. So with curiosity, he picks up the note, and he begins to read it. And as he reads it, his hands begin to shake. His head is trying to say no to the words. Tears are running down his cheeks, and finally, in anger, he throws that piece of paper not so much against the emptiness of space, but the emptiness that's now inside him. And he stands and he just stares at the note. Finally, he bends over and he picks it up and he tries to press out the wrinkles as if he could straighten out the words. And he begins to read once again, and the words are these: Dear Hosea, I'm sorry. You don't know how many times I tried to tell you, but I just couldn't do it. I felt the call to my old way of life, and I've left in the night to go back where I was. You're a good man, Hosea. I don't deserve anyone like you. I am so unworthy. It's better this way. Gomer. And the curtain falls on Act 2 with Hosea wondering, what will he do? I don't know about you, but there's something in me that would just like to grab a hold of Gomer and shake the life out of her, or maybe shake some life into her. How dare she turn her back on the only person who has shown her authentic, genuine love, who rescued her out of the unfaithfulness of her life. And now she's gone a different way. But Jesus said, before we become too critical of others, we may want to look at ourselves. And wouldn't we have to say that even though at some point in our life we may have felt God calling to us, coming for us in the midst of our unfaithfulness, we reach a point when we say, God, that's far enough. I don't want to go any farther. God, I'm going to turn my back on you. Isaiah in the Old Testament put it this way: we are all like sheep and have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. What happens when we as sheep turn aside? You know the little nursery rhyme, Little Bo Peep had lost her sheep. What's she supposed to do? Leave them alone? If she leaves them alone, what are they going to do? No, they're not. People that know sheep better than I say that when sheep are left alone, they never find their way home. They remain eternally lost, and I think that's what Isaiah was saying. It's not that they just got lost. How will they ever get back? How will they ever return? It's a good question. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. But we sometimes say, Jesus, I think I like my way better than your way. And we live accordingly. Jesus, I know what your truth is, but this is a truth I choose to believe for me. I know you say you're a life, but I like my life the way it is. And I got some areas I don't want you to interfere with. Just leave them alone. So what happens when we turn our back on God like Gomer and begin to break the relationship with our God? It's a good question. Jonathan Edwards, who was a preacher in the 1900s, phrased it this way. He's got a classic sermon. I don't even like the title of the sermon, let alone the sermon itself. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. And he said, God is so fed up with people like you and I that he's holding the world over the fires of hell with a thin thread, and he's trying to decide, should I hold on or just let go? What will God do? The answer is in Act 3, and the curtain's coming up. We're back in the kitchen of Hosea once again. He gets his coffee, he gets his paper. He sits down at the table to read, except we notice he can't read. Well, he can read, he just can't concentrate. His mind's distracted. Ever since Gomer has left, every day he's wondered how he could get her back. And we watch as he gets up and he paces back and forth across the kitchen floor if somehow that's going to bring her back. And as he's walking, he hears that voice again, Hosea. And he decides to ignore that voice, although he's heard it. Hosea, what? I am the Lord your God. I know who you are. Well, Hosea, I have a message for you. Really? Remember the last one, how that worked out? Not so well, did it? Hosea, be quiet and listen. I know your heart's broken by Gomer. You've been miserable ever since you left. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to the land of the unfaithful people. I want you to declare your love for Gomer a second time, and I want you to restore the relationship with her and bring her home. No thanks. Hosea, do as I say. And the voice is gone as well as the presence. And as Hosea thinks about it, he realizes, he's absolutely certain that's what he's wanted. He just hasn't had the courage to even do it. And now with God's help, he's shown him a way. So he's willing to take the risk, not knowing how it's going to turn out. And we watch as he once again tidies up the kitchen, locks the front door, makes everything secure, starts out across the meadow to the land of the unfaithful people. And curtain falls on Act 3, Scene 1. They're resetting for Scene 2. We're back in the village. As he enters the village, he sees those same 4 women still talking. But he knows he won't ask them anything. As he comes across the men, all 4 of them are now leaning on their shovels. But he doesn't ask them either because he's pretty certain where he will find Gomer. She's the same place she was before. She said she was going back to her old way of life. So he goes back to that same building. And sure enough, as he enters that building, there's Gomer in the back with her back turned, standing almost in the same place. And once again, he gets the sweaty palms, the increase in his heart rate. He feels love swelling up in him again. And he knows he's done the right thing. And then he notices that music is playing again. In fact, it's the same song. You know how that song ends? Once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her, never let her go. And it's just like confirmation. This is what God wants. This is what I want. So he approaches Gomer. At her back's turned, she feels someone coming towards her, and she turns and she says, Gomer, what in God's name are you doing here? And he said, well, Gomer, I am here in God's name. My love for you has never stopped, even when you left. I want us to restore that relationship we had. And by this time, Hosea feels so guilty. She feels so sinful that she can only look at the floor. And Hosea, with gentle hands, puts him on her head and tilts her eyes up until he's looking directly into her eyes and says, Gomer, I love you. I've loved you from the moment I saw you. I love you now. I will love you forever. But I'm so unworthy, she cries. I get to make that choice, said Gomer, not you. And you are not unworthy. I love you. Can't you get that through to your soul, to your spirit? They're both crying, and Gomer confesses, ever since I came back here, I've been miserable. I thought it would be better here, but now I realize it was better there, but I knew there was no way back. There is a way back. Come with me, he says. And as they're getting ready to leave, a voice cries out, where are you going? And who are you? And it's a man. And Gomer says, this is my husband Hosea, and I'm going back home with him. Not so fast, young lady. You're my property. I own you. What will it take to get her back? Said Hosea. 15 pieces of silver, a bushel of barley, and a flask of oil. And Hosea says, okay, I'm willing to do that. And so he makes arrangements for the 15 pieces of silver, the bushel of barley, and the flask of oil. And we watch as they have their arms around each other, laughing and talking, going across the meadow back to the home. And the curtain falls and the play ends. Hosea had to buy Gomer back. Do you know that the Apostle Paul said, you are bought with a price? And the price was Jesus Christ dying on the cross. When Jesus said, regardless of how you've turned your back on me, regardless of how you refuse to follow me, I still love you. I love you in this moment. I will never stop loving you. And I can guarantee you the price that Jesus paid was worth far more than 15 pieces of silver, a bushel of barley, and a flask of oil. The wholeness of God's love comes to us even when we turn our back, and he keeps seeking us and offers us a new opportunity for fellowship. That's why Hosea could say, your faithfulness comes from me. Without God seeking us, without God continuing to seek us, without God continually offering his love to us, we couldn't be faithful. But because of his love, we can be. G.K. Chesterton lived in the 1900s. He was a Christian apologetics. He tried to defend the Christian faith. He wrote numerous books, was a well-respected lecturer. In fact, C.S. Lewis said that J.K. Chesterton had more to do with his conversion to Christianity than anybody else. The only problem with Chesterton was he had a horrible memory for where he was supposed to be and when. So one day he sent a telegram. That's the way they communicated then. Sent a telegram to his friend and said, am I to be at your church this Tuesday or Thursday? And got a telegram back, neither, a week from Wednesday. He sent a telegram one time to his wife and said, I'm in Harborough, where should I be? She sent a one-word message back, home. And she later explained it's easier to get him back home and start him out again than tell him how to get from where he is to where he needs to be. And I think Jesus is just saying to us this morning, why don't you all just come home and we'll start out again. Welcome home. Let's pray. Gracious and holy God, we are so grateful for your presence in our life. We are so grateful that it's your love that sought us at the beginning, and you have sought us every moment, even when we've turned our back on you. And even now, you want to receive us into your open arms. Lord, how grateful we are. We're like Gomer. We feel unworthy. We feel guilty. We feel sin-stained. But that doesn't stop your love for us. You welcome us. You rejoice that our spiritual wholeness is in your love and that our faithfulness comes from you. To you be glory forever. Amen.